God's entrepreneur. Today we look at the preparation of an entrepreneur. Now, some time back when God first gave me this mandate for business, I preached a teaching called The Signs of the Fivefold Business Calling. And that was kind of an introduction to this whole concept of being an entrepreneur for the Lord. I want to continue now in the vein of what's involved in becoming God's kind of entrepreneur. And I want to look today at the preparation that God puts a person through when He's called them to this level of calling. It can be very confusing when you compare ministry and business, but yet they actually flow very well together. In the ministry realm, we had the fivefold ministry, and we saw the various levels, the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher. And the highest level, the greatest leadership ministry, of course, was the apostle. And so we looked at the apostle, and we saw that there were different kinds of apostle. That an apostle is somebody who rises up, gets trained in all the ministries, and is able to function in virtually everything. Now, interestingly, at that time when I taught on the apostolic preparation, I used an illustration to try and help you understand how God trains His apostles. And the illustration I used was business. Go back and review the apostolic preparation. You'll find out I was talking about business right back there already. Now, many of the principles that I will share today on the apostolic, on the entrepreneurial preparation, are very much the same as the apostolic preparation, but they're slightly different. So if you want a full picture, go back and review the apostolic preparation, because I'm not going to repeat what I taught there. But if you put the two together, you're going to have a full picture, because the chances are, if God has called you to be His entrepreneur, He has already called you to the apostolic level of ministry as well. And the apostolic ministry and the entrepreneur kind of run side by side. What exactly is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur, according to the world, is simply somebody who has started and owns and runs a business. But an entrepreneur is far more than that. I would like to take this term and I would like to use it in place of the ministry of the apostle. So when we speak about the apostle, we're speaking about the ministry leadership. When we're speaking about an entrepreneur, we're speaking about the business leadership. So, if you like, the entrepreneur is God's apostle to the business realm. Now, the entrepreneur needs to be a jack of all trades. Just like the apostle needs to be one who can function in all ministries, so the entrepreneur should be one who can function in all types of business activity. The entrepreneur should be somebody who's worked his way up through the ranks. And that's the illustration I used in the apostolic preparation of somebody who starts at the lowest level, works their way up until they become a managing director of the company and reach the highest level. The entrepreneur must be a captain who has learned to sail all different kinds of boats, as we consider building the business boats. And so I want to look at how God prepares the entrepreneur, and then after that we'll look in a bit more detail at the kind of training that the entrepreneur goes through. Now, as compared again with the apostle, the entrepreneur needs to be able to function in many different kinds of job. The entrepreneur needs to be able to function in many different kinds of business. And the entrepreneur should be able to relate to different niches or groups. And so I'd like to look in a bit more detail at some of these, and to help you illustrate it, I'm going to take myself once again as an example. Since I know that God has called me to this level of leadership and function as His entrepreneur, I'm hoping that some of the experiences that I had along the way are going to be similar experiences to what you have gone through. Now, it's not going to be the same. God trains and prepares each of us differently according to our background, according to where we were born and lived, and and many different things in our lives. So I don't expect you to say, well, I didn't go through those experiences. Maybe I'm not an entrepreneur. I want you to just see what you can identify with in some of the things that I share, and perhaps you'll see some similar patterns in the way God has prepared you for this calling. And so we look first then at God's preparation in different kinds of jobs at all different employee levels. The very first job that I had was as a casual employee. That's what they called them those days. I was still a young guy. I don't think I was even a teenager yet. If I was, I may have just turned into a teenager, but I think I was probably about 11 years old or something. It was so far back I can't remember. And my mother worked for a company that was like a clothing outfitters, and that was her regular job. And during the school holidays, they would take in casual employees to come and work part-time just to earn a bit of extra pocket money. And so, naturally, with my mother working there, I got a chance. I was given an opportunity to get in there and do my very first job. Well, I always did work around the house, but that wasn't being paid. This was the first time I was doing work where I'd actually get paid for it. And I remember when I walked in there, and they said, okay, what you need to do is you need to be there to help all the customers, to help people if they're having a problem, to show them things, and just to be there for whatever is needed. And so they put me out there, and it was, I think, a Saturday morning, and they were having a special sale on, and the place was crowded with people. What was my job? My job was to make people buy. Well, I'd never been trained for this kind of thing before. All I needed to do was to go and help, and I was as helpful as I could be. I was in there watching people when they picked up the clothes, and I'd be there and say, can I help you? And I'd help them. Are you looking for another color? I would just do whatever I could, and I walked round and round. Man, I never stood still for one. I walked round and round the shop looking for people that needed help. I wanted to really impress them, to get a good reputation in this job. And afterwards, one of my mother's bosses said to her, who's that young guy that we had there today? He was really amazing, walking round and round. If the customers had a need, he was there. I was really so impressed with him. She said, that was my son. I felt so good. My first job, and I excelled. And it was so wonderful to finally get the measly little bit of money they gave you, but it was my own money that I'd earned. You see, that was the lowest level of employee you could get, and that's where I started. And if you ever want to move into this business calling, you're going to have some exposure to working in the business realm. And so the lowest level is starting as casual or temporary or just a plain, ordinary employee. Well, my exposures after I left school were all to these great big corporation, mostly government organization type jobs, where you were such a tiny little cog in the machine that if you disappeared, nobody would notice. My very first job, which I took on simply because I didn't have money to go to university, which I was hoping to, I thought I'd get this job, and it was by the post office, which was a government-owned thing, and they had the telecommunications division. And there they would train you how to look after the whole telephone system, to go and work in all the different divisions that were involved in telecommunications. And there was a hope that if I went through their training course and I showed potential, that they would then send me to university to study the thing that I really wanted, which was electrical engineering. Oh, I wanted to be an electrical engineer, but nobody was prepared to pay money for you to go and study electrical engineering. So I never had the money. My folks couldn't afford to send me. So I got this job hoping that if I go on their training course, that I would rise up. And I found out that not only was I a small cog in the machine, but there were a lot of other cogs that looked a lot better than me. And they stood a far better chance of going to university than I did. And they weren't sending everybody. They were going to select one or two, and that was it. It didn't take me long to realize I did not have what it took to rise up and be that great big engineer that everybody would look up to. I was just relegated to ordinary employee in a very, very big company a non-entity. Well, there was no point continuing with this training course because I was far more intelligent than the people that I was being trained with. Most of them had left with lower school qualifications than me, and I only had taken this job in the hope I'd go to university. If I wasn't going to go to university, heck, I could have got a better job than that. I got the highest qualifications you could in school at that time. I was highly qualified, I thought. And all I was qualified in was intellect. I didn't know how to do the job. So I left, and I joined another great big government organization called the Railways. You know, the trains. Huge organization. And they had a job going in something scientific. Well, I was scientific. I had a scientific mind. They didn't have anything going in electrical engineering, but I chose the next best thing, laboratory assistant. Well, again, I thought the same thing. I could get in there, really impress these people, work hard, work my way up. It's a big organization. Maybe I can rise up, go on one of their training things, go and get a degree and become somebody important. And I remember the day I first walked into the job there, into this laboratory. And I had this zeal. And I was letting everybody know what great things I was going to accomplish, how big I was going to become, how hard I was going to study, how perfect I was going to become. And the guys who worked there, they tolerated me for a bit, and then they just called me aside and said, Les, you're working for the railways now. Calm down. Just do your job, get paid, enjoy the weekends, enjoy your annual vacation, and everything will go fine. Because you ain't going nowhere. Well, that burst my bubble. I thought, well, I'll work for a bit and save money and go to university. Now, it took a while for me to realize they were right. There was no point in rocking the boat. Just be an ordinary employee. Do your job well. Don't rock the boat. Don't upset the boss. Get your monthly pay. Every year they give you an annual increase and your pay goes up a little bit. And you just continue to do this really, really highly technical job. You know, the main job I had at that time was you took some of these oils that they had drained from the diesel engines and you put it in a little pot and you stuck it on a heater with a flame over it and you wait until it went bah. It went bah. You measured the temperature. That was it. It's known as calculating the flash point. That was my main job. Every now and then they gave me something else, testing something different. You know, the really good chemical tests and things were for the senior guys. I was just a little dog's body. Nobody. Yeah, well, eventually they gave me a kind of more technical jobs there. But you know what? I was still just a laboratory assistant. Well, you know what? My great big aspirations for rising up and having a career and being somebody high up in business, they began to die more and more and more. You know, and then I went through a season where suddenly God called me to the ministry. Well, that's why I never succeeded in business, because God had called me to the ministry. That was obviously the case. So off we went into ministry, and I failed in ministry. And I went back to work again, and this time I went to work again for another government-owned organization, an aircraft company. By that time, we'd moved down from Rhodesia, where I had grown up, into South Africa. And there I was in this wonderful, famous job, just being an ordinary admin clerk. I'd get up early in the morning, get on the bus to travel to a nearby city where the job actually was. And there I was, annexed to the Air Force. And I wasn't in military. I was working as a civilian, but as all Air Force personnel. And there I was doing my little famous admin job, coming home at night and getting paid an absolute pittance. Those were my experiences at being a casual, ordinary little employee. Well, you say now, you know, if God's called me to great things, why should I have to go through those ordinary little jobs and be an ordinary nobody? Because one day you're going to employ ordinary little nobodies. You better understand that person's position. You need to understand their aspirations. You need to understand their frustrations and what they're going for. You've got to start at the bottom and work your way up.